Okay, I'll call this special regional council meeting for April the 17th, 2020 to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is being recorded and streamed on a publicly accessible website, and please respect social distancing. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor?
Yep.
Carried. Adoption of minutes, comprehensive budget minutes, special regional council of March 20th, special regional council of March 23rd, and special regional council of March 27th. Can I get a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Business arising, COVID-19 update. Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, just checking. Just some updates for what we're currently doing related to the COVID-19. So we had originally intended to bring a regional campground report to council today. We've pushed it out into next week, probably to next Friday. We're just gone out to the province to get some further guidance and clarification from the province regarding some specifics with the direction with the closure of the BC parks and the rec sites that have camping abilities. So we just want to confirm we have all the appropriate information for council as part of the report. We bring that forward to council. We're also currently looking at, it was discussed earlier the week with a couple of councillors regarding some potential Wi-Fi internet access within the community for people that might not currently have the ability to connect to internet from home. So currently we're in the process of identifying areas in the community that provide free internet, typically through Wi-Fi access. Before we would communicate any businesses that provide that particular service, we would we'd obviously would contact the businesses to get approval to communicate that out. And of course, in the majority of these areas that we're looking at, obviously, is access from outside a facility, not inside a facility. This also includes us, meaning the NRM, where we have currently public Wi-Fi. So we're looking at areas that we have, the public has the ability to access our public Wi-Fi from outside town hall, and also the rec facility. Requires us to potentially make some internal changes to be able to increase the range of our public Wi-Fi signal. So we're working through that currently. And then additionally, just there's a publicly available computer terminal also at the Service BC site with access to the internet with limited access to limited to general web surfing, access to government sites such as CRA, Service BC, and Service Canada. Yesterday, the province announced temporary changes to the property tax framework to give relief to small business and free up funds for local government. As has been the norm or typical, and for obvious reasons, with information that's come from the province, due to a lot of the quick decisions and the information that's been passed down, and a lot of times it's more clarifications required, sometimes generates a number of questions. So as such, we've reached out to our provincial contacts within the Ministry of Affairs and Housing to get more information, to get some clarification, and council can expect a report on that possibly late next week. We'll see what information we get, so they can we can outline with council what that information from the province actually means. For information, just for council's information, in case you hear, so Nav Canada has reduced their service levels at the airport control tower. So they're doing a remote service from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. This does not impact our airport operations in regards to the availability or ability for planes to land during that time. It just means that if there's a flight coming in, our airport staff will have to turn on runway lights. So that's about the only change, but just in case you hear about that potential service reduction, it doesn't impact the current operations out there. In addition to the regular meetings that's going on, the regular meetings, calls with ENBC, et cetera, in the province. In the meantime, we also had the spring readiness call this week with ENBC. Which typically occurs this time of year to review and discuss the forecasting with regards to freshet, so flooding, spring thaw, and wildfire forecasting based on conditions. Because of course the wildfire season is just around the corner. So with everything else going on, we still have that. We still have those typical activities occurring. So as is typical for this time of year, Aaron is arranging to pull together the local EOC stakeholders to meet remotely, of course, which includes the local wildfire branch and to review the local conditions and forecasting specific to our region. So that's also occurring in the background. So that's the high-level update for council.
Okay. I was on that conference call on Thursday with Selena Robinson. There wasn't an opportunity at that time to ask any questions, and it was, as Mr. Berry said, centered around assistance that the provincial government was going to be giving to municipalities, and we will be getting more details on that as they become available. The Chamber of Commerce also, I was on a conference call today regarding, they had Myers Norris Penny there as accountants, giving a rather detailed description of the benefits that were available from the federal government and the provincial government surrounding employment, assistance to businesses, and everything else. It was actually very detailed and included who was eligible, who wasn't. So, and they are going to be putting something together for the Chamber of Commerce to put on their website as well. So if anyone is talking to anyone who has anything to do with or is wondering about these programs that the federal government is rolling out, the Chamber of Commerce certainly available to give people that guidance. Parcel tax review panel, Mr. Coupe.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a rare item where council doesn't need to do anything. So if you remember from last year, the parcel tax review panel took over from the old quarter revision that we used to hold. Council only needs to address, this is a requirement from legislation to be able to hold this. So notice went out in the paper a couple weeks ago, attached to your agenda. No questions or concerns were raised regarding the parcel tax, and there was no changes. And Tony, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but there was no changes to any of the roles, and with no comments, the parcel tax review panel does not need to convene.
If there was a need for the parcel tax review panel, who would be appointed to that, or how would that appointment go?
So last year, council appointed all of council as the panel. So essentially, you would just take care of it within the meeting as council
as part of a public meeting then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors, on the parcel tax review? No, okay. Admin report number 27, emergency business relief. Mr. Berry, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's someone from Planet, so that Jay with it, sorry.
Tony, Mike, and Jack co-authored the report, but it was a group effort, certainly. So there's been a few inquiries received informally from members of our tenant group, both at the airport as well as within other municipal facilities around relief for lease rates. So in an effort to kind of compile all of those issues that council could potentially discuss at once, we did some analysis and gathered some background for council's information related to municipal leases for lands or facilities, as well as looked at utility rates as another potential opportunity for consideration. So where water rates are billed out based on a formula of consumption for commercial clients, sewer rates have a tabulated rate structure based on the type of business. So the information is compiled here for council. There's been some options presented at the end that to sort of generate some discussion, but ultimately we wanted to just raise the concerns and invite council to have a discussion about them.
Okay, so in reading this, I thought about hotels first and foremost, because the tourism industry is being impacted the most, I think, with this COVID-19. And I thought, perhaps some relief is in line for hotels, also restaurants. Although the restaurants aren't totally shut down, they're noticing a huge drop in business. And I thought that, maybe some relief would be in line for that. So I was going to ask council for their thoughts on this. No.
I think I think that it's a great idea to look at providing what relief that we can. So I like the idea of addressing the sewer rates. Also, I read in the report about removing any penalty that there might be for bills that are going unpaid for a certain length of time. So I liked that option as well. I think it was council may wish to waive the 10% penalty outlined in sections 8.3 of the sewer rates and regulations bylaw. So I thought that was really something that we would look at doing as well.
Any other questions, councillors, on water and sewer rates for some of these businesses? Councillor Andrews.
Do we know what other municipalities have been doing? I read through this and I hadn't noticed anything on there. I haven't had a chance to ask myself. I would just like to we've been trying to keep everything constant, the same. I know the province keeps saying they want everything to be the same across the board. So I just think, just to make things easier, if we could have everything the same, if we do this, if the other municipalities aren't doing anything, then by all means, I do like what Councillor Gerwing said about the 10% penalty waiver. We could do something like that. And most of these ideas I like. I know the banks are doing referrals for mortgages. It could be a similar program we do for leases.
Mr. Perry, do you know what other municipalities are doing regarding this?
I can speak to that if you like.
Go ahead, Ms. Pike.
So in terms of the sewer rates, our rate structure is archaic and other municipalities aren't in the same boat as we are. Their structures are already tied as a multiplier of the water consumption rate. And we did look at that a few years back when we spun our wheels with it and we haven't gotten anywhere, and it's back on the table this year for analysis. So that's why we're looking to seek relief, if possible, on those sewer rates that are based on the type of business you have.
That was the point that I was going to make as well, given that the sewer is reflective of a normal flow, no pun intended, a normal flow of traffic in various, especially in the hotel industry or restaurant industry and so on. And I think that given that we've been a community in decline for a long time in the usage overall, and I think that making some kind of a better connection to sewer billing according to actual usage is just a more equitable system. It just makes sense to do it that way. However, it makes it more complicated. And so I'm all for the revision of sewer billing system, that's for sure.
Any other comments, councillors?
Yeah, I wonder if we want to have a discussion about looking at rent reduction, at the very least, not putting in place the annual, I think it's a 2% increase I read. But do we want to have a discussion about if there's any room for us to reduce the rent for tenants outside of the federal or provincial government?
Okay, but I think we're looking at water rates at the moment for some of these businesses in town, and I think we need to discuss the fees that we charge to these groups separately. Is there any comment on that? Would you like to separate them out?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to go further on the water sewer rate issue. there was discussion in the write-up about the 20%. Could someone explain that verbally here? So the idea of dropping rates to a 20% for the time of COVID.
Ms.
Sure,
McIver?
I can
Go ahead,
address
Tony.
that one if you like. Yeah. So we did take that actually from other locations who are attempting to make sense of how to rationalize it. We also looked at a recent request that we've had from one of the local hotels, and their indication is right now they're at about 20% up. We don't want to drop people to zero. We still believe that there should be a payment for consumption of that service. But we thought at 20%, it's reasonable.
Any questions on reducing the rates to 20%?
I'm wondering what ramifications that would have on the municipality, if someone could speak to that. Like financial ramifications.
This is
Sure. So yes, absolutely. So what we've said is no less than 20%. So for instance, we would be putting in a reporting mechanism for the local hotel to report on their occupancy. And if their occupancy was greater than 20%, then it would be an amount greater than 20%. Certainly, we know for the next few months, it will mean a reduction in sewer charges. We have not quantified it yet.
Okay, and we're not just speaking for hotels, right? It would be for like everybody, like not residential, but we're talking business. So the leaseholders at the airport as well, like, or are we simply speaking to the hotels and restaurants right now?
Right now, we're looking primarily at hotels, restaurants. We're looking at perhaps hairdressing, barbershop, locations that have definitely seen their business reduced.
Thank you. Ms. McIver?
Yeah, no, to add to what Tony said was we were just looking at basically businesses that have been directly impacted by the provincial orders. So hotels, obviously, with recommendations to limit non-essential travel, they're seeing a major impact. Restaurants have been ordered to reduce operations to delivery or takeout models. Our rate structure is based on the number of seats in their facility, while knowing they can't fill a 50-seat restaurant. Under provincial order, they can't fill any seats right now. We're just looking for kind of an equivalent fee to what level of business they're able to deliver. And then there are some businesses that have been ordered to close entirely, and that's the personal service establishments, hairdressers, barbershops, massage therapy, things like that. So where they would fall into a rate category, it would be our suggestion that there be a reduction as well. So that's up for discussion, but it's just, I mean, those businesses that continue to operate as normal, in fairness, they are probably not seeing a major reduction in their revenues. There are some businesses that are actually doing quite profitably from the whole situation. So I think it's just looking at putting some measures in place to allow some equity for those that have been negatively impacted.
So I'll make a motion here that we go with administration's recommendation here that we reduce the sewer rates to 20% for those businesses that have been forced to close and have been impacted that way. And in the event of a hotel getting more than 20% of their occupancy, of course, that rate would be adjusted. Could I get a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Penny. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Carried. Let's move on now to the leases at the airport. And I think generally the leases that the municipality has for businesses, but I think specifically a lot of them have to do with the airport. Ms. McIver, did you want to speak to that as well?
I might let Mike jump in on this one. This was his section to prepare and research. So.
Mr. Gilbert.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
You are.
Yes.
I guess the numbers speak for themselves. There is some consistency across the leases at the airport, with a couple minor exceptions. There is one non-airport commercial tenant, and that's all that is referred to likewise in the report, and that's the concession operator at the rec center. With regard to these leases, Councillor Gerwing raised the issue of how water sewer rates might apply to them. Generally speaking, tenants at the airport aren't billed individually on a metered basis, but rather they absorb a common share. According to their leases, they absorb a common share of the cost of operation of water sewer services at the airport. So the previous motion wouldn't necessarily apply directly to them. The legal advice obtained boils down to putting it in my opinion, putting council in a position of being relatively safe and exempt from any challenge based on perceived subsidy to business by reducing rates. And I think council's latitude in making a decision that way was enhanced by the federal government announcement yesterday that they would support commercial landlords with loans and or forgivable loans, details yet to come, should they be prepared to forego or reduce lease payments to commercial tenants. That won't apply to the municipality's tenants, but likewise, it provides shelter for council in making any decision favoring the reduction or waiver of rents, in as much as it takes away the argument that municipal tenants are being given favored treatment vis-a-vis other tenants of private sector landlords.
That's good.
The other principle that needs to be adhered to, and this could be covered by policy for consistency's sake, is that whatever grouping council were to determine should receive some kind of relief needs to be implemented in such a way that there is demonstrable equity, so that no particular business is favored over another business. And by having policy that gets away from any kind of ad hoc business by business decision, and council could elect to make that relief available based on some criteria set, or simply by application. So not approach the tenant directly, but make it available, make the tenant knowledgeable of the situation, and then allow them to apply for relief.
Mr. Gilbert, are there any tenants that we have that are not affected? As Mrs. McIver had mentioned, some businesses are doing very well under the current circumstances. Are there any tenants that we have that are not affected negatively by this that you ran across?
None that I'm aware of.
And are there any that are only partially affected? Or so I'm thinking primarily of the concession stand at the rec center. Of course, their business will be down 100%. Are there any businesses that are not down 100%, but are down a significant proportion?
My dogs need a place to walk, so I visited the airport a number of times in the last few days, and I see absolutely zero activity other than our work crews doing maintenance.
Very well. So, Council, given the fact that most of our, or all of our lease holders are being affected more or less 100%. They have zero revenue. I think what we should do is we should waive the rents that are required here during the pandemic. I don't know if we want to go back as far as the 1st of April to do it retroactively, but I don't like to see us charging rents for something that, through no fault of any of these businesses, there simply just isn't any revenue. Mr. Andrews.
Retroactively, at the very least, for our tenant at the rec center, through no fault of their own, as we all know, we shut the rec center down in order for that, and now they're no longer able to operate their business in there. So at the very least, I would like to see retroactively for them. The rest of the tenants I'd be fine with as well, but I'd like to hear what council says.
Any other comments? So council, what we're probably looking at here is April and May. Zero rents from any of our leaseholders. That's what it'll probably look like, at least at a minimum. Councilor Roper.
Do any of these figures include utilities that are paid by the renters, or is this just strictly the lease?
These refer to lease payments only.
Any other comments?
I would say that there are a couple of businesses there that are working steady with aircraft maintenance and so on, and that's going on inside. So those businesses, it's not as though they're completely affected. And the idea, if we just forgive the rent for the duration for the 2 months at least, we're not giving opportunity for application for relief. I mean, we're not letting them apply. We're just giving them the relief. Is there a difference, or should we have structure in such a way that we can have them apply for it if they feel that it's necessary for them?
And let
Mr.
them
Gilbert?
indicate.
Yeah.
Let Mr. Gilbert reply to that.
That's completely an option for council to decide based on their determination. Certainly it's possible. So if, as per the previous decision, if council wanted to set some threshold for activity and say it's arbitrarily 20%, that's possible too for a business that's functioning, or establish some criterion. It might be a little difficult to make a determination without getting into the financial side of the business.
Councillor Gerwin, then Councillor Penny.
I'm wondering, I think that we might all agree that no matter what, businesses have been affected by COVID-19. I'm talking specifically at the airport, by COVID-19 and an economic downturn. So I kind of like the idea of forgiving all rents for April and May, just for ease. Like, people are going through a huge upheaval. So asking them to apply for something, although I fully understand how and the whys of that, I prefer the blanket reduction or no rents for April and May. And then I just would like us, when the time is appropriate, to talk about not increasing the rents, the 2% upcoming.
Councillor Penny.
I just wonder, a lot of businesses that are negatively affected in this town right now that are not renting from the municipality, they're managing to get, their payments deferred for an X amount of time, but they're still expected to make those payments at some point. And I just worry about wiping out rent for a couple of months. As Mr. Gilbert had mentioned, that we're kind of free of concern that we're favoring those businesses, but at the same time, we have a multitude of businesses in town that are still going to have to continue to pay, whether they be lease payments, rent payments, whatever. After this is all over, they're going to have to catch up, whereas our municipal tenants aren't. Is that not concerning to anybody else?
I think that point is well taken, Councillor Penny, and as Mr. Gilbert had pointed out, that we have to be equitable, and I don't think it just means equitable to our tenants, but equitable in a broader sense in the marketplace for leases that are out there. Mr. Gilbert, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what, or maybe you don't know because it hasn't been rolled out yet, about what sort of relief the federal government is going to have for tenants regarding regarding commercial leases.
The only information that they've provided to date is a very general statement, which says they will provide landlords of commercial properties loans and or forgivable loans. It doesn't specify conditions or amounts. Should they decide to reduce or forego. So the assumption might be made, but it's only an assumption on my part, that for those that determine to reduce rents, they would get a loan to cover the part of the rent that they don't reduce. Whereas if they forgive rents, they might receive a forgivable loan.
The other thing is, as far as the airport goes, we're not looking at people who are directly in competition with other businesses as well. You know, if we were in the position where there was a business in town that was not getting the rent forgiven and a business that we had a lease on that was, then I think we would have a much more difficult decision to make. Councillor Souls and then Councillor Penny.
I think that the concept of the rent forgiveness is fine, but it concerns me, and I think that the way that you mitigate the potential conflict that comes out of it between businesses is to leave it by application. Is simply like the federal government, if they roll out forgivable loans for businesses, they're going to be by application. It's not going to be, you can't just line up in a lineup and say, hey, I've got a business, I need help. They're going to make you apply for it. And so I think that that's that way after the fact, businesses that have done well or maybe even prospered because of COVID, they can be glad that they didn't have to take a handout or didn't have to get a hand up or whatever it is. And that way you mitigate it. It's not us determining who gets, it's giving the opportunity and letting application take place.
Councillor Penny.
That would be more my point as well. I was in my head, I see it as right now I'd like to see a deferral of payments at a minimum, so to take that stress off these businesses currently, and then we could set some sort of criteria and have them apply for forgiveness is where I would rather see. And I understand what you're saying as well, Mayor, that if there was a business in town that competed with a business at the airport, yes, that would be a real troublesome, but I also see it even without it being direct competition. It's just anybody that's trying to make it in business right now, to see one business get a better hand up than the next, I think would cause some turmoil.
I understand what you're saying. I guess my problem is that in the current environment, it's not as though the businesses can, once this is over, recoup those lost revenues over April and May, and then at some point have that revenue to catch up on the rent. The revenue is lost; it's lost for good. So I'm thinking that under the circumstances, what I would suggest is that we forgive the rent for April and May, and we tell the businesses that if there is an opportunity for them to apply for relief, we would expect that the municipality would be reimbursed for that rent. And if they're not, well then the municipality will be picking that up entirely. Councillor Penny.
I totally get what you're saying there, but at the same time, many other businesses in town aren't going to be able to recoup, no different to the personal mortgages that are deferred that we're going to have to catch up on later on with interest and all that. We're not going to be able to recoup lost wages. My business isn't going to recoup any of the revenue that I lose over the next couple of months. So again, it just, I totally understand the argument, but at the same time, I just feel that anybody that's leasing from anybody other than the municipality right now, are they going to get the same treatment? And I don't believe they will. I think that they're going to have to come up with this money at some point, or a reduction or whatever. I'm really fearful that we're giving a little bit too much to the municipalities' leases than other businesses in the town will receive. So, but we'll just see how it goes.
Okay, other comments? Councillor Roper, Councillor and Councillor Roper, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, just with the information that the Chamber of Commerce provided, that it's a rugged front as far as landlords go, and some are being given breaks, and others are getting less preferential treatment. Given that there's no real consistency across the board, I think we're in a good position to be able to provide some relief for the tenants that we can. So I would be in favor of providing that relief. It might set a precedent. It might give other landlords the opportunity to also do that. So I think we should do what we can.
Councillor Gerling.
I think just to address, I know this probably won't make Councillor Penny feel so much better, but just so that you know, a while ago there was a large commercial landlord that gave all not-for-profits a decrease in their rent right across the board without even being asked for, and the municipality didn't follow suit. So I hear what you're saying, but we can only control what's within our sphere of what we can control. And I'm really hoping that the provincial governments or the federal governments, whoever's running the commercial landlord proposal, will address the rents for those businesses in town that we can't currently help, except for maybe through the sewer rates.
Very well. Councillor Andrews, did you have a comment? Councillor Andrews looked like he's gone. All right, I'm going to make the motion then that we forgive the April and May rents and for our leaseholders, and if there's an opportunity for them to get compensation through the federal government, that they're required to do that. Councillor Gerwin.
So you're not meaning the provincial government or if we have any federal government leaseholders, right?
No, not the provincial or federal government.
Could we include that? Thanks.
Councillor Andrews, you're back. Do you have any more comment?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened there, but I am back now. I kind of left off there where Councillor Penny was talking about having people apply, and I think that application, just to ease things up, I'm sorry if we've kind of skipped over this. I think I would rather have people apply if they wanted it than kind of like make it simple where here's the program we're offering. We're going to defer or we're going to forgive the next April and May's payments if you requested it, or just 2 months, let's just say 2 months. And they can, as simple as a email request, yes, we need this, or no, we don't at the moment. And I think that would be a better way to go about it.
Councillor Andrews, there's a motion. I've made a motion that we defer April and May rents, and if there's an opportunity for the commercial customers to apply for some grants that would relieve their rents, that they're required to apply for it. And we exclude the federal and provincial governments from this. So I've made that motion. I'm going to ask for a seconder, and then if you would wish, you could make an amendment to that motion. So I'll ask for a seconder.
I'll second the original motion.
Seconded by Councillor Roper. Councillor Andrews, you want to perhaps make an amendment then? Did they? Councillor Gerwing.
I thought when you originally talked about it that it was a deferral, but after the 2 months, that it could be forgiven if no other program came to light. Did I make that up?
I was thinking that it's forgiven, and then we require the commercial customers to apply for whatever federal funds there are. But I think it's just two different ways of coming at the same problem. If there's an opportunity for these commercial customers to recoup some money to make those rent payments, we would expect them to do it. But deferring them is fine if you're more comfortable with that.
No, I'm not. You said deferral, Mayor. So I was, your motion, you said rent deferral, and I thought we were talking about a forgiveness.
Oh, that was my mistake then.
Okay.
What I meant was a rent forgiveness.
Thank you. Okay, well then, yes.
Councillor Penny.
Okay, just to jump on that, to get to more of my point is, yes, deferral, immediate deferral of these rent payments with the ability to possibly be forgiven. The one other thing there, we're asking that these clients keep an eye out, and if there is any availability for funding, that they get it and provide it to the town. I just feel like they may be a little bit more apt to check into these programs and apply for them if at first their rent payments are only deferred, instead of, okay, you don't have to pay any rent now, and if you do end up getting some money, please send it our way. I think it'd be pretty difficult to get companies to do that. I would trying to think of a motion that I would like, an amendment to your motion.
You can amend the motion to say deferral instead of forgiveness.
I would make an amendment that we put in that it's deferred with the possibility of forgiveness. I don't really know what other rules to stipulate on there right now, but I just.
So we're gonna vote on. I'll get asked for a second for the amendment then.
So moved.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Souls. Can we have a vote then on the amendment to change the wording from forgiveness for 2 months and requiring the businesses to apply for whatever grants are available from the government to defer the rent? All those in favor? 3. We have a tie.
Well,
so the motion fails. The amendment
could
fails?
I just ask a question about that?
Oh, certainly. Go ahead, Councillor Gerwing.
So is it's okay. Is the amendment then leading to a motion that says that currently the rent will be deferred, and if there is no rent forgiveness, federal or provincial initiative, that the municipality will forgive that rent? If that's where we're headed, then I'm in favor. But the way the amendment, okay.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. That's my fault as much as anything.
Oh.
I have difficulty enough with coming up with motions and amendments, let alone when I'm talking on this headset and
I hear you.
Hearing myself. But yes, I would just prefer that we defer it for now, put it on the backs of these companies to actually look into to see if there's any funding that they can get. If they are not able to get any federal or provincial funding, then we can look at forgiving these payments.
Okay, then I would be in favor of that as it's said.
Okay, so the amendment passes then. So as you stated, Councillor Gerwing, Councillor Penny as well, that these rents will be deferred for April and May, and they may be forgiven if the commercial leaseholders are not able to get relief for rents, and that it does not apply to federal and provincial governments. All right, I'm going to ask for a vote on that then. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Well, that was a bit of a
That
struggle.
was easy.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, we just need a resolution now on the amended resolution. Or sorry, no, that what you just did.
We did it.
I think we're over the finish line here, are we not, on this?
Voted on the
Mayor
amendment.
Foster, may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Does council wish to provide any guidance on how we deal with our not-for-profit and community organization tenants?
I felt that we were all doing the same thing, including all of them. So the not-for-profits and the community organizations would also be under that same rule. Councillor Penny.
I just took a breath, but I was under the same impression.
Councillor Gerwing.
Except for the leasing at the rec center, right? We've closed that building, so we're only going to defer or forgive the rent for April and May. If the building isn't back open, then I don't think that would be fair.
Yeah, I think we may have to revisit this, Councillor Gerwing, if the building remains closed after the end of May. The idea is we don't know the end date of the opening of we don't know the date that the building will open, so we may have to deal with that at a different time. Mrs. McIver.
So just for council's reference to, the visitor center is not leased space, it's municipal space. The Chamber of Commerce office is the leased space, and they continue to operate as they did. So they've chosen to reduce their in-person hours, but because it can be segregated, they could continue to operate as they have.
Thank you. Moving on to our...
sorry.
Councillor Gerwing, go ahead.
Sorry, just want to address the fact that if we're talking about deferring rent or possibly forgiving it for our community groups that we fund, as we are looking at that budget too, it becomes a little bit more complicated question, because we charge them rent, but we fund their rent. So that's just a consideration to think about as well.
I think Mr. Berry had addressed this earlier about even though we pass a budget with a certain amount of money allotted to these organizations, it is not a requirement that we actually give them that amount if they're not providing the service for some reason or other. So, Mr. Berry, did you want to speak to that?
There's a bunch of different ways council can look at this when it comes to the nonprofits that we fund. Next Tuesday, we're planning on discussing the budgets specific to the nonprofits, so it might be an opportunity then because different funding mechanisms for the different particular nonprofits depending on what they are. So it might be a good opportunity at that time to take a look at it and get under the hood of them, because council approves those particular budgets for each individual organization, correct? If council's okay with that.
Yeah, and we did a pre-approval on the chambers. No, the visitor center. Was the visitor center.
The visitor center budget was pre-approved, yeah.
Okay, if there are, Councillor Andrews.
Almost forgot my mic. So just for a quick clarification, and then I got one question. So the motion we just passed is going to be extended to places like the theater and play school and stuff if they need it?
Yes.
Okay, and with the rec center being a little special circumstances here due to COVID, we've had it shut down, and the tenant in there with, the pub, not being able to generate any revenue, I would like to make a motion that if we have the rec center closed down due to COVID, that they don't need to be paying their rent, because there's no sense in us forcing them to pay it or even talking about it to them paying it if we're not even letting them run business.
I think that's where we're headed to with the previous motion that we made, is exactly that direction.
I was just thinking, might as well make the motion now and then save a meeting later.
Mayor Foster, may I interject a piece of information for council's benefit, please?
Mr. Gilbert, go ahead.
Checking the details of the lease for the rec center in particular. Its lease expires as of June 30th this year, and it is on a variable seasonal rental, $750 in the busy season when the arena is open, and $300 a month. So $750 and $300 a month in the off season, with an expiry date on the lease of June 30th this year.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews made a motion. Is there a seconder for Councillor Andrews' motion?
I'll second that motion.
Very well. All those in favor? Carried. Moving on, budget 2020. Who would like to speak to this?
I'll lead in and then I'll hand it over to Jay, and then we'll go on the line. We'll start off with the plans to go to the regional development planning budget and work through that, which would be under your big tab, your colored tab 7. And what we can do for council's choice, if they wish, after we're done the regional development planning, if there's if council at that time, as we've gone long now, can decide if we want to continue on with the buildings facilities capital budget. So we'll I'll hand it over to Jay, and then let her take over from here.
So I when I followed along on Tuesday's meeting, there was an interest of council to have a brief review of the project. So please let me know if that's something that you find useful, or if you want just to kind of go through a highlights list, because I think this is probably the second time that you've probably heard the details on the projects, but I'll try not to make everyone fall asleep, but I can kind of rock through them.
Ms. McIver, if you can just give us the highlights. If there is any specific questions from councillors, we can always interrupt you, and we can always get into whatever details council wants to. So if you would, Mr.
And I'm assuming that council would want the individual, like the last meeting was looking at each individual approval for each individual project.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So just a high-level overview operationally. So last year our expenses were under budget, similar to previous years. A lot of this has to do with grant revenues offsetting operational costs, as well as basically just spending it when we need it. So we didn't have a whole ton of professional service fees this year, not a ton of legal fees, not a ton of engineering fees. So we managed to have some savings there. Our 2020 budget is slightly under the 2019 budget, and that's just, we've removed some risk from the operational budget. Obviously, if we get sued, that could change, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Special projects. So as always, largely our special projects in regional economic, at least at the time that the budget was prepared, focus on economic growth and diversification. So the team has actually been working really hard in the last 2 weeks to take a critical look at those projects and really think about where we might have been planning growth-related economic development work. What do we need to refocus as recovery economic development work? So the conversation that you just had around the reality of businesses, it could look very different. They might not be ready to scale up this year or look at different diversification opportunities. They might literally just be looking at, how do I get back to my baseline? So yeah, the team's been really taking a hard look at some of our projects and seeing how we can adjust our sales to put the focus where it's needed in that regard. There's a number of multi-year projects, as you'll see when we go through them. So a lot of them are coming to an end this year. Many of them, as I mentioned, are grant funded, and that means a lot of them are also carry forward funds. So we mentioned it a few weeks back when we were reviewing the budgets, but overall our special projects, we rely heavily on grant funding for those, and about 20% of our capital projects are actually funded from new money this year. So we were mindful of that and what we were projecting for the year. So I'm just taking a look here at page 3 of the metrics. So you'll notice that obviously our building permits are down in numbers, but the value's actually gone up. So there was some new development last year. Business licenses, they have decreased, but I see there's an extra 0 there. We did not have 5,000 business licenses in 2018 anyways. But overall, they've been pretty stable, all things considered. We are seeing a number more environmental assessment referrals, and also with the dormancy regulations for oil and gas sites that came out last year, that's taken up a fair amount of our time, just ensuring that we're giving adequate comment on those notifications and the associated EA referrals. Dougie can attest to that volume of work. So do we want to just go into the capital projects?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay.
Is there any questions, councillors? Very well.
Okay. So bylaw updates, we this year had targeted review and potentially revision of at least 2 of our core bylaws. So one's our business license bylaw, which our hopes are to better align it with the zoning bylaw and definitions and business types, etc., as well as make it a bit easier to administer. And then the building bylaw. So the building code had a large revision here this last year, and there needs to be some updates to that. And then as a result of our zoning stuff last year, the issue was raised that we don't have a development application procedures bylaw. So that's one that we targeted for this year. Honestly, from a capacity perspective, this may be one where, like I said, the sales get shifted, but our thoughts are that what we would do is, if we are forecasting that there's going to be an underperformance of the full project, we would come back to council with a potential, a proposal to basically redirect those funds to a recovery type project.
Are there any questions, councillors? Very well. I'll ask for a motion then to approve the $30,000 for the bylaw updates. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried.
Okay, wildfire prevention implementation. So this is a remaining of last year. It's fully grant funded. So really there's no tax burden on this one.
Any questions on the wildfire prevention implementation? I'll ask for a motion then. Moved by Councillor Gerber, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.
So the next one's the 2020 wildfire prevention implementation. So this has a number of prescription treatments, and I think we were expecting notification this week. We haven't received it yet, but it's 100% grant funded. So obviously if we don't get it, we don't do it. It's as simple as that.
Very well. I'll ask for a motion for the 2020 wildfire prevention implementation budget. Moved by Councillor Gerber, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried.
Is that normal that all those pages are there? That's okay. So the next one's the Boreal Caribou Restoration Review. So some of this is carryover funds, some of it is topped up by new money. Again, this is one of those projects that if it is not fully realized this year, we may look at reallocating those with council's approval. But in any event, this is funds that would support potentially relying on biologist support or engineering support to review the boreal caribou restoration implementation plan that's developed by the province. So, yep.
Mr. Barry.
Sorry, Jay. If we can just, so we can go like this back up, you have, I'm not sure if your document has, but if we can just go to the green sheet and then we can look after, if we just get the planning one, then the planning budget's looked after, and then when you jump into the next pink, which would be the boreal caribou, you're into regional development and tourism, and so, is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, yes.
So essentially for the planning operations budget, we'd be looking at a net tax requirement of $416,421 for the 2020 budget. So that includes our operations and major maintenance, which in our case is our special projects.
Any questions, councillors? Can I get a motion then? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor of the annual budget planning? Carried. Tab 33, boreal caribou restoration. Did you have anything more to say on that? Very well, I'll ask for a motion then to approve the budget of $15,000 for the boreal caribou restoration review. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Economic forecasting, Edison.
So Edison is a database that we have maintained for, goodness, a number of years, 10 years at least. No, 7 years. And basically it houses all of our internal data. So everything from our building permit stats to our airport landings. It collects in StatsCan and BC Stats data and allows for comparisons and reporting both in standardized formats and custom formats as we need it. At this point, we have an annual license fee, which is what is captured in that $15,000.
And Edison is working well for us?
Continues to, yep.
Good. Can I get a motion then to accept the economic forecast Edison $15,000 licensing fee? Moved by Councillor Gerwing, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried.
Okay. So our regional economic strategy phase 2, which is the implementation. So it's a blend of carryover funds and grant funds. This is one of the ones that we have the greatest potential to adjust. So obviously the RES was looking at growing and diversifying our economy. And while there remains some excellent recommendations, we see that the more immediate need is to adjust a little on the recovery piece. So Mike and Jack have been working feverishly on that. And the nice thing is that any of those activities would be entirely grant funded or would be eligible under this grant program anyways. So it might just look a little different when it comes out in the wash.
Very well. Can I get a motion, please, for the Regional Economic Strategy Phase 2? Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.
Can I just ask
Councillor Gerwin, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to ask a question on that. How close are we to getting a dashboard on the website updated website? What's the timeline, kind of?
So we extended the RFP for the municipal website to the end of the month because honestly, just a capacity perspective from given all the things COVID happening. But we have a call scheduled for next week with the proponents to review a number of questions that they've proposed. And then once it closes, the investment portal or subsite is a part of that project. So we understand obviously extending the RFP date might have an impact on the completion of the site because we are trimming into their time to do the project effectively. But yeah, the investment subsite is part of that project. So, and that's the intention, is to feature some outward facing dashboards that capture those socioeconomic indicators.
Okay, thanks.
Moving on then, Fort Nelson Community Forest. Mr. Toth, would you like to speak to this?
Sure. With the community forest, we are rapidly, or we have set up the CF Corp. And during that process, we've established our board of directors, and the NRM staff and the FNFN staff representatives as partners signed off on a budget there yesterday. And what I was hoping we could potentially look at doing is have council consider this capital request and use a portion of it that we had originally thought was going to be used to complete the CFA that money be used as seed money for equity to put towards the establishment of CF Corp. We anticipate, I think the budget that we signed off on yesterday, Northern Rockies contribution would be about $27,000. I was thinking that it would be reasonable maybe to, if we could get some kind of resolution that would say up to $30,000 could be moved over as the equity portion. Council will be receiving this probably down the road within a month. There will be something coming as a formal presentation, but it might shorten it up a little bit in terms of what we have to do. And originally when I had talked with Tony there a couple of months ago, we were talking about taking this money from surplus revenue funds or whatever those special ones are that are off the board.
Very well. So is this $27,000 out of the $52,000 I'm looking at here?
Yes.
Okay. And we would like to move that to the CF establishment of the CF.
We'd like it to be 30 to be round.
30? Okay.
Thousand.
Can I get a motion for that, please? Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. And then I'll ask for a motion for the total of the $52,000. So the 30 plus 22,000. Is that correct? For a total of 52,000. Can I get a motion for that, please? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Gerber. All those in favor? Carried. Phase 2 Aspen market analysis.
This is one of these lingering ones that I think we started this off in 2017. So this is just carryover funds. We've made 2 applications to the RDI group to allow us to extend this project. They gave us an extension there last year. It's kind of up in the air whether they will extend the project for this year, but we gave them some alternate uses for the funding that would support the development of the Aspen resources in the community, and we haven't heard yet, but this is just carryover of funds.
Very well, I'll ask for a motion then, please. Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Regional connectivity strategy.
So this is basically just the completion of the project that council was presented with a couple meetings ago now. The meetings are blending together. But this will allow us to claim the grant back and basically finalizes the report that was presented. So.
Any questions, councillors? Very well, ask for a motion, please. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Regional connectivity stage 2.
So this one is this allows us to carry out the initial recommendation of the report that council received a couple meetings back. We have yet to pursue a grant opportunity, and there's obviously some new money required there. When we were looking at potential projects, this was one that it's entirely up to council, so there's not a ton of urgency with this one, though the sooner we pursue it, the sooner we get our steps completed to improving connectivity. But ultimately, if council wishes, we would flag this one as an easy redirect to recovery projects, or council may wish to look at it a little more critically. It's entirely up to you.
Any comments, councillors? Oh, Councillor Gerwin, you're muted, I think.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Just confirmation that if we don't get the $10,000 grant that we haven't applied for, that the $20,000 would be redirected. Is that, do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Very well. I'll ask for a motion then. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Building facade program.
So this one is typically a through and through. So when we prepared the budget, we had typically, this has been a $20,000 program. So it's NDI funded, and we basically just administer the grant program locally. And then any monies that we distribute through the program is reimbursed by NDIT. The interesting thing with this is that NDIT is looking at redeveloping this program on their end, and they're encouraging communities now to apply for the full 20. So we reduced it to 10 this year because we didn't see a huge uptake in past years. However, if they reformat the program to be more recovery focused, it would be our recommendation that we increase this to 10 and also increase our application, or sorry, increase this to 20 and increase our application to 20 to provide that larger scope of distribution.
So we're looking at a building facade program. What's in front of us here is a total of $10,000. Do you want us to increase that to 20 then? Very well. Any comment, councillors? I'll make the motion then if we increase that to $20,000. Can I get a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.
So Tony's probably going to hate me for that because that one just, I was made aware of that yesterday. Sorry. But we can increase it on the revenue side too.
911 mobile services.
So 911, this is one that we've been slogging away at for a number of years. We are against some challenges again with our local service provider. However, we think that we see the light at the end of that tunnel coming closer. So that being said, this is one of the ones that, although it is all carry forward funds, we don't anticipate needing the full budget this year, and we would look at this as a potential to redirect any unspent funds to recovery if required. So the other thing is, in a lot of these special projects, there were consultant travel costs built into the budgets. And so obviously in the current situation, nobody's traveling. So there's some of those savings that I talk of is probably around that. We're not bringing people in from other areas to discuss projects. So that's where we'll probably see some surpluses.
And we're sure this is a light at the end of the tunnel and not a train?
I hope so.
Any comments, councillors? Very well. I'll ask for a motion to approve the 911 mobile services budget of $42,930. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Love Fort Nelson. And who doesn't?
So this is a through and through, basically, and DIT funds us to administer the program. And as some of you may be members of it, it's just a way to promote our small local businesses that are independently owned and operated.
I'll ask for a motion for $1,200 for the Love Fort Nelson. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.
So Rec Center solar feasibility, this came back, this is coming back to you. It was pre-approved, I think it was the beginning of the year. So this was in response to the presentation that came to council for looking at solar panels on the roof of the Rec Center. So we have yet to apply for the grants on this one. And this may be one where council may want to consider the feasibility, just because if the rec center is not operating and if the solar panels have nowhere to divert that power or offset any consumption, It may be one we push out to a future year, or it may be one that we just get the business case done this year and shelf it until it's time to consider a more fulsome capital investment. Just looking for direction on that one.
My preference would be that we at least develop the business case now, and then we can implement it later if we want. But I think we should get this done. So I'll make that motion. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried.
Okay.
Solid Waste Diversion Community Initiative.
So this is part of implementing the solid waste management plan and looking at some of the more sustainable opportunities within that. So as council will recall, there was the donation from the Social Planning Council, I believe it was, that has been put in to offset these costs. So it is a bit of new money there. But regardless of everything happening, we are looking at some opportunities, especially considering, as we know, our local recycling depot was closed. Burma composting carries on, and also next week's our Earth Day. So, you know, the opportunities are still there regardless of what's happening in the community. So,
Can I get a motion then to approve the Solid Waste Diversion Community Initiative budget for $20,000? Moved by Councillor Gerwing, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried.
So tourism strategic plan implementation. So this is all carry forward funds. At preparation time, we were looking at some major marketing activities, potentially earmarking some funding for the Tourism Advisory Committee recommendations that may come through to council. And quite frankly, tourism looks a lot different today than it did 2 months ago. But that being said, we do see that marketing will still need to happen. It's just going to take a different form. And just like our other businesses, our tourism businesses are going to need some special support to get through this and recover, especially depending on when things get back to normal and whether that's post-tourism season or not. So
I'll ask for a motion then. Are there any questions, first of all? Mr. Councillor Penny, you have a question?
No, I was making a motion, but I will just make a statement that I think our tourism industry is probably going to be the hardest hit for the longest, because even once this generally gets back to normal, tourism, I think, is going to be a long ways off before it gets back to normal. So they're going to need as much help as we can possibly give.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Penny for the Tourism Strategic Plan implementation for $25,400. A seconder, please, for that motion. Seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
So
Visitor Center operations, go ahead.
am I there? Oh, I'm on trade show attendance.
Sorry, I must have missed one.
That's okay.
Sorry, I missed the trade show, annual trade show attendance.
So this is a through and through as well. We attend on behalf of some other organizations, and they grant us to do that, and those have come and gone. So this one was pre-approved. I think it was in the fall to do that. So
these funds will no longer be needed if the trade show is canceled?
They've already been attended.
We were there already.
These are the out-of-town trade shows.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I thought you were referring to the trade show.
Our local one, no.
Okay. Can I get a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Visitor Center operations.
So this was pre-approved as well. Bev made a presentation to council at a special meeting, and the budget was pre-approved. In discussions with her, she does foresee that she's been preliminarily approved for her summer work program funding from the feds, and so she does anticipate bringing on at least one staff for the season to support some virtual visitor service functions. So because clearly keeping the visitor center operational in its traditional sense isn't feasible right now, but we still do want to ensure that the service is being provided in some way. And people may still be traveling in amongst the province. So they're also seeing a lot of other requests come in that are business related in terms of what businesses are still open, to what degree are they operating, and having that support would be good from a, if it's funded, she might as well do it. So it may look different. This may want to be reviewed later in the year, but at this point, this is what we've got to go on. So,
Councillor Gerwin.
So question, how do we keep this at the forefront in terms of, like if it's $75,000 isn't going to be spent, or isn't that it's not necessarily spent? Are we going to request like a report midway, or what are we putting in place?
so in terms of the contract, we require a midterm report and a year-end report as part of the. It's January to December, but the season is deemed to be May to September. So what we can do is just ensure that we're within that midterm report. We maybe get a budget snapshot to see where things are at, because we also we're not going to be shipping out the amount of guides we normally do,
Right.
with other visitor centers closed, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then at the end of the year, if there are surplus funds, I think it's just a discussion with the contractor about whether those are carried forward in her budget for next year and the ask is reduced for 2021, or if we want to hold them on this end. Either way. So I would just say, I think we evaluate at the midterm report, and then maybe something comes back to council to just reflect on that and get some further direction.
Right. So then do you need a motion to indicate that council would like to be informed midway to see how that money is being spent, or
Sure.
what do you, okay.
Yep.
So I would make that motion.
Mr. Barry, will that come back automatically to council then, or do you require a motion? I mean, we've got so many different things that are going to be affecting this budget. I imagine we're going to be getting reports all the way along about changes and differences.
It could. It depends how council on the frequency, what kind of frequency council wants. The general direction council can take based on some of the unknowns is based on, because obviously there's some budgets, and obviously we're going to run into that next week with the cultural groups and nonprofits. There's some unknowns in terms of what it looks like here in the months to come. So council has the ability to obviously approve the budget. That means that the budget's there to utilize the funds as required. It doesn't mean that the funds need to be utilized or will be automatically utilized. And council can give that direction now generally to say, as staff, for us to monitor that, and we can bring that back. In terms of frequency, we'd want to, because we wouldn't automatically bring something back for the visitor center, for example. But even with that being said, it doesn't mean that throughout the year, if the visitor center didn't require those funds, it doesn't mean that they would automatically just get the funds, and we would ask for further council direction on that one.
So then I would go with my motion. I would like to make a motion that council receives a report at the midpoint.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Second by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried.
So just for clarity, when you say midpoint to the year, Councillor Gurley, you're thinking, is it so June, like halfway through the year?
I just don't want anybody to have to make another report. So if the contract already states that they're reporting back at X date, then that's fine. I just want to make sure that it gets to council.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Very well. I'll ask for a motion then to accept the visitor center operations. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Public Washrooms Partnership Program.
So this one has a little bit of carryover funds only because our year is a little wonky. It runs from April to March, April 1 to March 31. But in any event, we are looking for some additional operations funds to top up that and basically carry our existing contracts with highway operators through to another calendar year, as well as earmark some funds potentially for the partnership with what we were calling the Gotta Go program, which was the construction of 2 highway pull-out washrooms. So I don't know that we have any renewed information on that, but we do know that the outhouse at Trutch has remained open despite the pandemic. So, feasibly that could go ahead as it was planned originally.
Any comments? Very well, I'll ask for a motion then for the Public Washroom Partnership Program in the amount of $64,000, moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Northern Rockies Hiking Guide.
So this one has been, it changed course slightly. So it was originally, I think 2 years ago, anticipated to be a republication of our hiking guide. In the course of that time, we saw some of our trails changing significantly in infrastructure, and we recognized that we needed to better understand who owned what degree of maintenance was being conducted on what tenure was on which trails before we go out and publish a guide encouraging people to visit sites that may no longer be passable. So when we prepared the budget, we had anticipated that this would include a trail assessment. So having people go out, hike trails, inventory the condition, and then looking at basically some maintenance and capital planning with the other agencies responsible. Now with the closure of BC Parks, this is one of those projects that may or may not get completed this year, and so we would keep this one in the back of our minds as a potential to redirect those funds to something more recovery based than forward looking, I guess.
Very well. I'll ask for any comments on this. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion for the Northern Rockies Hiking Guide, $30,000. Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Northeast BC Tourism Marketing Consortium, $12,500.
So a number of years ago, we decided to roll some of our marketing activities into a co-op effort. Also as a result of Destination BC's change in how they were distributing grant funds for tourism throughout the province. So where they used to fund individual communities, now they fund co-ops. So we became part of the Northeast BC Tourism Marketing Consortium co-op. So we fund a portion of that that we used to spend basically individually. We now spend as part of a larger group effort. So this is new money each year, but obviously with changes in the tourism sector and the fact that the only things eligible are marketing efforts, this might be a reduced contribution, but again, if there's surplus funds here, we would look at how they can support tourism businesses locally.
Very well, I'll ask for a motion, councillors, for the Northeast BC Tourism Marketing Consortium for $12,500. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Tab 34, Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Annual Budget, Regional Development and Tourism.
So as you'll see, basically our operations expenses for regional development and tourism for this year are $609,157 for a total net tax of $972,607. So that's what we would be looking for approval.
Can I get a motion then, councillors, for that? Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Moving on to tab 35, Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Annual Budget for Building Inspection.
So this is our building inspection, doesn't have a lot of special projects, so the budget requested just simply funds the operations there, so it's $175,880.
Could I get a motion for that, please, councillors? Moved by Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Tab 5, Building and Facilities Capital Budget. Is this very long?
It depends how long you want to make it, I guess. It depends on council if you want to take a stab at it, or it's entirely up to yourself, Mayor and Council, of course, if you, it's.
Oh, I think we can probably slip through this fairly quickly. Hope Council doesn't have any other plans.
So it's just before we head into it, so we've got, so Jaylene will speak to, I think, one that she has on here. Actually, Harv is here, of course, to talk about any other ones related to him, and then Luann's on the line also. It's linked to our buildings from it's linked to our building and facilities capital plan through our asset management program. It's a similar program that we've had and that we presented to council in previous years. The difference this year is we've taken anything related to buildings and facilities and put them under the one umbrella versus having them individually approved within the departments and then having them connected back to a larger plan. So we've tried to make it a little easier in regards to that. And then of course anything within that contribution that's not looked after from a capital project would go into a reserve contribution. And then similarly, this was linked back to a presentation that was done by staff back last summer with the buildings and facilities plan to council too. So if you don't have any other questions, we can proceed.
Go right ahead.
I'm wondering, could we have a 5-minute break?
Certainly we can. Can I get a motion to adjourn for 5 minutes, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Gerber, seconded by Councilor Andrews. All those in favor? We are adjourned for 5 minutes. Okay, I'll call the special regional council meeting back to order. Mr. Berry, you were speaking to the capital projects, capital budget, buildings and facilities.
Yes, Mayor, thanks. So this is, as I was saying, this is our annual buildings and facilities budget, which previously, previous iterations of this were presented to the regional council within each individual department. What we've done this year is to simplify it and to capture under the one umbrella for buildings and facilities. It has its own separate entity now from a presentation perspective. Each individual department heads will be presenting in each individual request specific to this. This year, the total value of this, and it's linked to the IDCA agreement, so it's part of the contribution either from the province or ours. So the $5 million from the province, or the little over 2.5 that we are contributing to the agreement this year. So it's $1 million. It's worth the value is about $1 million. I'll start off the initial contribution, or the initial one is the contribution to the reserve fund. So out of the $1 million, 97,000 will be contributed to the reserve fund. I guess the question is, because this is all part of renewal, previously, Mayor, you'd given the direction and requested that we'd walk through each individual one as part of that renewal piece. Do you wish to do the same for this, or would you like to look at them individually?
If we could do them together, I think, unless council's got any specific questions.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so so the initial one is $97,000, which is the contribution to the actual reserve fund itself, and then I'll pass it off to Luann to talk about the airport terminal building critical asset renewal and what that is.
Good afternoon. The airport terminal building's in need of a new HVAC system. So this $50,000 is to do an assessment to look at the entire system at the terminal building, as well as any potential asbestos interactions that may occur with that work and any electrical tie-ins.
Any questions, councilors? Okay.
Good afternoon. The next one is the rec complex hydraulic valve replacement. It was a 3-year program. We're entering our 3rd year in 2020. There was an $8,000 carryover from last year and a $100,000 budget this year for a total budget of $108,000 for 2020.
Could you tell us what a hydraulic valve is?
The hydraulic valves are all of our water valves that are inside phase 2 and 3. There's 172 of them. Going between 2 and 4 inches. The reason we're replacing all these, when they were manufactured post 2009, the valve fitting didn't close completely, which allowed the water to be able to bypass. Since then, they've created a new valve, which has a locking mechanism in place, which keeps the valve shut or completely open, which allows for then better functionality inside the rec center, less hot water going by, and then, of course, with boiler reductions and all that, because the valves are working better.
Any questions, councillors? Very well, moving on to the heat exchanger.
Heat exchangers, we have over 20 heat exchangers inside the facility. We upgraded a number of those in 2019 when we had the ice plant upgrade. There's still a number that are inside the pool. They need a 2-year servicing preventive maintenance program. This will be the start of that program, and we have put in $120,000 to start that this year. Anything left will go into reserves for future needs on that heat exchangers.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Very well. Parks and Recreation structural renewal.
The structural renewal, there was a budget put forward last year that we put in for park structures. This year, we would like to draw $15,000 out of that money to be able to look at the outhouse facility at the mile 301 Roy Gardner Park. It's a facility that we haven't done work on in a number of years. We have had a report done in 2018 for those structures, and it recommended replacement this year.
Thank you. Facility mobile assistance and access.
This one is for the pool aquatic change rooms and hallway doors and doors leading to the deck. Since we put in this budget, we have found out from NDIT that we were successful in a grant that would offset these costs up to $44,500, and it will help people with mobility issues to access the pool change rooms and give them more independence while they're dressing and undressing.
So where it says grant 0, it's grants 44,000?
Yes, sorry, Mayor. That's news we just recently heard. So we haven't actually done anything inside the system to put that out, but we will be doing that as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions? Town Hall Municipal Administration Facility renewal options.
Okay. We have had a report done by McQuaid and Associates to look at all the town building structure from the foundation to the roof. There's going to be a number of points coming out on that once we get the ability to present to council. And once we do that, we can have the engineers to come forward to explain exactly what they had found for findings, to be able to give council information to understand what the needs of the town square building are and what would be needed to be able to make the life expectancy prolonged or any other decision.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Very well. Moving on to technology and communication renewal.
I'll speak to that one, Mayor. So this is a new process that we are starting this year, just to remove some of the peaks and valleys regarding the replacement of the technology, if it's either hardware or software. So cell phones, any software associated within the organization, server requirements, upgrades, repairs, et cetera, and things of that nature, desktop replacements and things of that nature.
Any questions, councillors? Okay, building facility asset management plan update.
With that one, it's a $20,000 budget. We had an original plan done several years back. Since then, we've had many updates and many reports that have come in. To be able to keep that plan up to date, we would use this money to be able to put all that into place to be able to keep the facilities program moving forward.
Any questions? Simpson Trail residence renewal.
So this is one of the physicians' houses that we own. It was donated to the municipality some years ago, and we invested some money in it at that time. Since then, we recognized that the vinyl decking is exposing the deck to potential weather, as well as the home is due for resealing, just for basically longevity and maintenance.
Any questions, councillors? Toad River Hall renewal.
Toad River Hall is a $15,000 budget for foundation work. It was identified in 2018. Fortunately, during that time, some work had been done on a new patio or deckway into that building. Some of the foundation work was captured at that time. There's still a little bit of work that needs to be done, and then hopefully the ability to spray insulation in there, that to give it a warmer building and less energy costs as we go forward.
Thank you. Questions? Ice plant chiller replacement.
This one's a carryover from last year's upgrade. We still have engineers doing reports for us on the ammonia levels have dropped significantly, so we need to be able to provide the information on the area that a ammonia plume would create for safety reasons. And once we have that, we can update all of our processes and policies. And we also, if there's any equipment identified that we could fix after, or not fix, I guess it would be improved after last year's install.
Thank you. Any questions? Public Works shop hoist. Ms. Watson.
So these funds are requested to replace the shop hoist that was damaged last year, and we're unable to recertify it. This put our mechanic back in business, and the Public Works building renewal is $175,000. So we're looking to do some repairs that became apparent last year after we did some cladding. So to replace some door sills on the shop bay doors that have been heaving, and replace some panels on the bay doors that'll provide some better lighting, as well as replace the concrete pads that are in poor condition.
Very well. Any questions on either of those two items, the Public Works shop hoist or the Public Works building renewal? Landfill scale building.
One question, sorry.
Councillor Andrews.
I'm in and out the fire, well, not so much anymore, but I have been in and out the fire hall quite a bit. And part of these heavings you're talking about, is that going to fix some of it at the back end, like towards earth communications there? I noticed there was some heaving back there behind the fire hall.
Yeah, it's front and back.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? Moving on to landfill scale building.
And do we have a request for $120,000 for landfill scale building to replace it, as it's in need of some substantial repairs? We just don't feel that it's worthwhile spending that kind of money on it at this point. Just replacement's a better path.
Any questions, councillors? Very well, I'll ask for a motion on all those, the entire building renewal facilities capital projects. Moved by councillor Andrews, seconded by councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Oh, one moment,
Excuse
please.
me.
One moment.
Sorry, just quickly, so just for council's information, the plan on Tuesday, as part of the budget meeting process here, will be to review the general government and also to review the cultural groups, so nonprofits and cultural groups.
What tabs are those, Mr. Berry?
Oh, really? Cultural groups will be usually towards the end. I don't have.
General, I've got it here. General government is 9.
Yes.
And
Cultural groups usually follow.
yeah, I don't know. It doesn't say. Miscellaneous, maybe 8. Nope. Can't help you with that one.
Is it miscellaneous? Yeah, so miscellaneous is tab 8, which would be the
hospital.
Yeah.
So we're looking at
we'll have the hospital district there, most likely too, and then the cultural groups with the which includes a nonprofit.
So 8 and 9. And
then possibly the no, we went to the training and development most until after they were done in the rec center. So, and then once we're done all those, the intent then was the plan is to try to get into the rec center by Friday.
Okay, so for the small tabs, these are from tabs 36 through to 45 for council, 36 to 45. Councillor Andrews.
I'm sorry, if council would let me, I just have one request of staff. I should have brought it up at the beginning of the meeting, but I didn't.
Carry on.
Knowing that we have the Phoenix Theater working on doing their drive-in theater and parking may or may not be an issue, I would just like staff to work with the theater to provide some information back to council on what could be done to assist them in their drive-in efforts.
Very well. Do we need a motion for that, or?
I would make a motion.
I missed a part of it. Sorry, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, so the Phoenix Theater is working on doing a drive-in theater. And I know that parking's possibly an issue with the space in behind the theater there, like kind of where the play school parks, but up a bit where the farmer's market used to be held. I'm guessing it's in that area. I don't know the ins and outs for sure. I just think that they could probably use assistance with staff in maybe setting up parking or anything like that. Just if there's any way that staff can assist the theater, I just request that a report be done up to see if we can or should be helping that out. I think it's a neat program they're trying to do.
Yeah, so for sure. So we know that there looks to be something occurring Saturday night, which I know that the theater's been in contact with Harvey, which is more of the short-term piece to get something going for a drive-in, which we contemplated having discussions today with council, but I figured given the short notice and everything, we want to hold the process given what the amount of community outreach processes that we currently are doing. With some of the other items which have been brought forward, one of them being the parking in terms of the potential need for gravel as an example and things. What we would plan to do is work with the theater and get some information, firm up some information, and then provide a report to council to get council's direction and approval on any additional things that might need to occur relating to that. So that's in the works for sure.
Okay, perfect.
Very well. So I don't think that requires a motion if staff is already doing that and they've committed to bringing us back a report. Very well. I will ask.
Since we're on the topic, one thing I'll do is since the topic is brought up, we'll get a council resolution in terms of what is occurring this weekend since we had the topic, and then we'll tick that box.
Very well. I'll ask for a seconder then for Councillor Andrews' motion. I'll second it. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Penny?
Just didn't see my hand.
Oh, okay. And Councillor
disappeared out here.
My hands were full too, so here it is now.
Very well. It passes unanimously. Very well. Thank you. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
Moved by Councillor Penny, second by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'm not gonna lie, I actually missed the gavel sound. I like that.